Hey, e-commerce marketing podcast listener. I wanted to let you know that we have created a 6-month guide to marketing your e-commerce store. You can download this guide by visiting getosi.com/guide or by texting GetOSI to 33444. This guide will show you how to get more traffic, sales, and conversions for your online store. Get the guide right now by visiting getosi.com/guide or by texting GetOSI to 33444. Welcome back to the e-commerce marketing podcast. I am your host, Arlen Robinson, and today we have a very special guest, Andy Bedell, who is the head of marketing for KeySmart, one of Shopify's largest stores. Before KeySmart, Andy managed advertising as a consultant for ad agencies, apps, and other e-commerce stores. He has advertised all kinds of products and services, including $10,000 business courses at the University of Chicago and $1 million condos in Australia. The biggest lesson Andy has learned over the years is that marketing is all about uncovering why your product or service is useful and being able to demonstrate the value to your audience in a way that really connects them with what sells products. And once you have messaging that sells, then it's time to start scaling. Welcome to the podcast, Andy.
Thank you so much for having me. Listen to probably like 6 or 7 of these episodes, and they're pretty informative. I really like the one with Scott Wingo.
Okay, great. I really appreciate that. And Andy, a lot of course, what we're going to be talking about today is scaling product advertising and kind of, reaching into areas that a business hasn't necessarily launched into yet. But before we get going into that, why don't you give our audience a little bit about your background, how you got started, how you set up one of the largest Shopify stores, and where you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I'll go back to college. I was an economics major in college. I graduated from college and didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I ended up getting a job at University of Chicago Booth School of Business in the sales and marketing. Basically, it was a direct response shop. We were doing 1-week-long programs for high-level executives, and it was about $10,000 per course. So my job was to basically target these high-level executives through direct mail, LinkedIn, Google, and a lot of other traditional media forms. So that's where I got my teeth cut in direct response. We had kind of like huge budgets, and I was able to kind of fail a lot and learn a lot. And then a friend, I was doing a lot of freelance work while I was there. I was planning on getting my MBA. They don't really pay you very much as a staff member there. So I was taking free courses and planning on getting my MBA, but also doing a lot of freelance work. And that's when I was working with different SaaS solutions and apps. And then eventually I had a friend that had an extremely successful Kickstarter. It was a $330,000 Kickstarter. And about a year after his Kickstarter, proposed to him, hey, let me run some ads for you. If they're effective, then then you can pay me. Otherwise, you don't even have to pay me. You just have to pay for the ad spend. Okay. And we basically tripled revenue within a few weeks. And I left my job at U of Chicago, never got an MBA, and then joined this kind of weird e-commerce world. So I actually didn't set up a Shopify store. My CEO and inventor Michael did, but okay. I kind of took over the store and all advertising when I started in 2015.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, that's awesome. And it sounds like you have a pretty diverse experience as far as marketing and advertising is concerned. And as you mentioned, it's the e-commerce world, of course, is a little bit different. But these days, I guess when it comes to selling, if you're not selling online, then you definitely should be considering if you should be. Now, today we're going to be talking about specifically how a business can effectively scale their product advertising to increase their conversion. So I'll paint the picture. Usually a business, after they get going, they kind of cut their teeth in doing some advertising across, let's say, social media. They may do some pay-per-click advertising, organic, and they're getting a fair amount of traffic and sales, and things are going pretty good. But there's always going to come a point where they want to take it to the next level and scale it, because everything could be kind of flatline. And I talk to business owners all the time, and they tell me the same thing. We're doing well. We're paying the bills. Our growth is steady, but everything is just flatline. They're trying to tweak things with their advertising, but everything still stays flat. So what are some of the ways to effectively scale product advertising to increase conversions for a business that's in that particular, that fits that particular category?
Yeah, I get you. No, so I think, the most important thing I found is honestly messaging. That really takes a lot of research. So yes, you probably have most inventors, kind of just make these ads that kind of just assume that everybody knows why would somebody want their product. And they think of their product in terms of features rather than in terms of benefits. And, you really need to, once the product is out there, people will start using the product in ways that you never thought of. A simple example, I'm reading this book called Code right now, and it's all about past inventions. But for example, when Thomas Edison invented the phonograph, basically, the device that could record sound, he invented it to do like Bible verses and other self-help kind of, that was his idea for what the invention should be. And he really turned his nose up at the idea that people would use it for music. Right. And then years and years later, he eventually admitted that this is kind of a music playing machine. Right. And it was, unbelievably successful. So what I'm trying to say, and then, another one was like the pop sockets, those things that come on the back of your phone. Mm-hmm. The guy invented it as a headphone storage device. And obviously everybody uses it for selfies and other stuff like that. So what I'm trying to say is that as an inventor, you make a product and you make it and you create these features and you just assume it's obvious why people will use features. But then you'll end up finding that in the real world, people mm-hmm. will use it wildly different than you thought of. And there might be a bunch of value propositions or reasons to buy that you never thought of. So really what you have to do is you have to do some research, and you can do research the easy way just by searching through Amazon and looking reviews. But really you should be sending out emails to your customer base with, survey questions. I always like the question, what kind of person would you recommend this product to? Because this asks them to basically identify themselves, but then not in don't describe yourself, but describe another person that's like you. So it's a really good way to get them to tell you who they thought, would be a good idea for the product, and they'll tell you why. Another thing to do is I would recommend in the research stage is to, pull up and look at your, your best performing customers and send them an email asking them if they'd like to do a Skype interview with you for, mm-hmm. A discount or a gift card. Mm-hmm. And you'll learn a ton, right? And so what I recommend doing is making a list of those top value propositions. And by value proposition, I just mean the top benefits to your customers of why how they're benefiting from using your product, and figure out, do a bunch of research and figure out which ones are those ones that you're hearing over and over again. Mm-hmm. And then start creating ads that really, really demonstrate that value proposition. Right. And by demonstrate, I mean go through it, really go through it, show physically how not having the solution would be a pain, or what, So that's really really figuring out why people want this and why it's valuable, why your current customer base says they like it, and then figuring out how you can, really demonstrate that through video is really what's going to turn the lever for you.
Right. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And it's something that I think is often overlooked by e-commerce businesses as far as tapping into their current customer base to get honest feedback and opinions on the use cases for the particular product or service. I always see this time and time again. There's really just so much value in customers, even if you're a product company that sells, kind of a one and done type product where somebody purchases it and, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to do a reorder anytime soon. Even those types of businesses, there's value there because, they may be, like you said, using it some way that you never really imagined. And then that's how you can determine a whole nother market for your product. And I'd also like to add that businesses that are kind of thinking about going after a particular niche that they haven't necessarily thought about, it really does come down to just trying it, adjusting your messaging and, just trying some small tests, doing some, and Google AdWords is great for this, just tweaking some Google ads, with some different messaging that speaks to a different benefit, and then, seeing what little results that you get, and then just, kind of go from there.
Yeah, and I would even expand on that for Facebook ads. What can be a good way to look at this is get your core value propositions out. Our product does this, our product does that. Our product keeps your car clean or whatever it is. And then look through the interest targeting on Facebook and just go to you can click to say browse, and then literally go through each one of they'll have all these different categories. You can drill down into them and just look at them and say, do I see a specialized message for this category, right? For KeySmart, for example, I did that and I saw, real estate agents are, a possible target. Okay, well, let me change up the copy of my ad to say, real estate agents love when their properties are on KeySmart, right? So basically look through the options that they give you and then figure out, how do I take my more generalized value propositions and kind of write them specifically for one of these interests. You'll find out that 95 or 99% of the interests that they allow you, you won't be able to like personalize the messaging, but some of them you will be able to. And that's how you can test easily. Like create a more general video that shows your value proposition, and then just do copy tests of a bunch of. So I honestly will do one screen, have the browse interest, and another screen with spreadsheets, and I'll just like write down all the ones that I think are good, and then later I'll write down the copy points of like why I think it's good for this niche, and then I'll just launch the ad.
Okay.
See the performance.
Yeah, that makes sense. You really do not know how it's going to perform until you put it out there, and that's what you said is really the kind of quickest and easiest way to really see what the market says, because that ultimately is going to be your answer. If the market says that there's a niche for that particular use of your product or service, then you can go after it. Now, I talk to a lot of e-commerce business owners on a day-to-day basis, and I'm always talking to business owners that they're at a fairly good size and they've been having some steady growth, but they reach a point where they're like, okay, I'm getting primarily U.S. customers, but my product, I think it can really sell overseas. I have the capability to ship overseas, and I have the infrastructure to take care of that fulfillment. Why don't I go ahead and try it? If a business owner is thinking along those lines, what are some things that you think they should consider when scaling internationally?
Yeah, and I definitely think, so taking a quick step back, I definitely think that if you're doing well in the United States with your e-commerce store with Facebook ads, and you can ship to internationally, then you really, really, really should be thinking about it, because that's a really great way to scale.
Okay.
They say about 13% of e-commerce is happening in North America. And so that means that 87% is happening outside of North America.
Wow.
So that means that you're leaving about 87% of the world. And that's North America. So that's counting Canada, US, and Mexico all in one.
Okay.
So if you're just in the US, you're leaving a ton of money just sitting there on the table. And on top of that, you might be also creating an opportunity for some competitor in a foreign nation to basically just steal everything that you've done and create their own store. By not doing it, you're kind of you're leaving a lot of money at risk, and you're leaving a lot of money on the table, and you're risking never being able to get that money because you're giving, maybe somebody else can get a first mover advantage. But assuming that you've decided, all right, I can ship there and I'm going to test it out. What I recommend doing is, if you're on Shopify, download the Bold multi-currency app. It's free. You want to be able to makes it so that wherever they land, that it's going to check their IP address and give them the right currency for where they are. Okay. So if somebody comes to your website in Europe and they see that the products are denominated in US dollars, they're not going to convert as well as somebody that if they landed on the site and they saw there. So the first step is get the currency converter going. Shopify has the availability for Bold, the multi-currency app, and it's free. There's no reason why you wouldn't use it. Then the next step, I would say, is duplicate your best performing ad and set up a new campaign as an international campaign, and target that campaign at English-speaking countries like Australia, UK, Ireland, New Zealand, and Canada. Those are all rich English-speaking countries that generally perform really well. And since they all speak English, you don't have to translate your website. And that can be a really, really great way to kind of get your MVP or your minimum viable product to say, can we internationalize this? Once that starts working, if you start seeing success there, then it's time to actually translate your website. And you don't want to use Google Translate because it's basically like a robot and it doesn't sound right. Right. And so you're going to have to, have to translate your site. And what I built out is a team of like in language, in country translators. You really want to have people who can localize your copy. And basically the example I always give is where things can get really tricky with different, dialects and slang, because you want to write your copy like a friend wrote it. And so oftentimes that involves slang and it's not the most proper copy. For example, I live in Chicago. You said you're from Chicago. Yeah. In Chicago, when you get a Coke, you ask if you call it a pop. Right. Right. Like, exactly. Can I get a pop? Right. And when I'm in LA and I say, oh yeah, what kind of pops do you have? People look at me. They're like, oh, you're from the Midwest, aren't you? You're like a Midwestern weirdo. Yeah, and so Yeah. So and then imagine if then you have you have pop in your copy and you send it over to a German translator and they're like, what the hell is that? You know what I mean? Like they just don't even know. And so there's all these little traps that you can fall into where you're not properly localized. I've seen that when you actually translate in to German like that Germany is like an insane, like, and it's not just like, so once you start translating, I always recommend that you translate into German, Italian, Spanish, French, and then also Latin American Spanish, because Spanish from Spain is a little different than Latin American Spanish. Mexico is actually a really good place to advertise. But, and really, well, what I'm trying to say is, like, and it also pays dividends, because, like, Germany, for example, if you get your site translated into German, you can actually now advertise in Germany, Austria, Luxembourg, I think Liechtenstein or something like that's another country. So there's like 5 countries that you can, and Switzerland. So they speak German in all those countries. So basically, I've kind of gone through all the countries, and I have a list of like what language. I kind of start with like my ad campaigns with what language, and then I pick all the countries that speak that language, and I set my ad set up that way.
Okay.
And it's really been like, it's honestly been shocking how cheap some of the ads, how cheap you can get clicks in some places. Like in Brazil, you can get clicks for like 7 cents or 6 cents a click. And you can really, really scale your business. I've seen most of the companies that I've worked with that we internationalize, it ends up being that the U.S. is only about 40% or lower of their total volume.
It's hard to believe, and I guess a lot of businesses don't really realize that there's just, so much that, like you said, that they could be just really leaving on the table if they don't explore that. And, I think what you mentioned is very key, because when you're thinking about it, if you're not doing it internationally, I think a lot of businesses probably seem overwhelmed in the fact that, okay, how am I going to offer this internationally? What I got to think about? You mentioned a bunch of things as far as the translations is concerned, but it sounds like you can kind of ease your way into it. Like you said, the first thing you want to do is really, make sure you have something that's going to show them their particular currency, so that, when they come to your site, they see US dollars, they don't get turned off, because I think up front, that's really important. I can remember a couple months ago, I bought an app that was recommended, and all of the currency was just in pounds or euros. I was definitely very leery. I was like, all right, now I got to figure out the conversion. So, I went to the Google converter and, found out how much it actually was in US dollars. And then, I spent a good few minutes just debating, like, all right, I just wasn't that comfortable, even though it was a legitimate company. They were recommended by someone. I felt uneasy with it because, it just wasn't US currency. And I can imagine other people will have the same experience if they're overseas. They come to a site and it's US. So I think doing that up front, at least taking that step, and then, like you said, the next step is look at the English-speaking countries, and then figuring out how you can open up your ads to reach those particular areas.
Definitely important. You go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's open for a lot of businesses, a lot of different types of businesses, but I mean, in your opinion, from what you've seen, like, are there any specific products per se or product categories that really are more ripe for an international audience?
I think so. That's a really, really good question. I think the biggest thing to think about is just how big is my product? If it is really large, it's going to be very difficult to ship from the U.S. And then you're going to have to get like a 3PL in a different country. And that is, honestly, it becomes much more complicated. So if you're shipping grills, for example, it's going to be cost an ungodly amount to ship from the U.S. to the U.K. And so it's just not going to work out as much. So if you have smaller products that are lighter or just easier to ship, okay, so that's the first question is like, how much is it going to cost me to ship from there? Assuming it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg to ship from the U.S. And some people actually get away with really expensive shipping from the U.S. somehow. But anyways, once you figure that out, the next question is, does my product work does the tech work in another country? So I have a friend who runs SEO shower, and it's like this really cool little clip-on thing that you can add to your shower head to make it an aromatherapy shower.
Okay.
And he does well in the United States, but when they tried to sell into Europe, they realized that the shower heads are different there, and it just doesn't work. So the product itself doesn't work. So you might want to do a little bit of research to make sure, does my product actually work in this country? And then the next thing is contextual. So I see this a lot with more like t-shirt stores. If you have like very contextually relevant t-shirt stores to the United States, let's say, let's just say you had an American t-shirt shop, there's all American flags, and you try to internationalize that. Well, you're probably not going to get too many people in different countries buying American flag t-shirts. They might, but who knows? Who knows? But even then, I always give the example of like Seinfeld. Like Seinfeld was very contextually relevant to the United States, had a lot of jokes that had to do with pop culture. it didn't make as much sense for people in different countries that didn't understand what it was like to be an American.
Right.
So it didn't perform as well as some shows like, Married with Children and some other things that are a little bit more slapsticky.
Mm-hmm.
So the more, the less visual and the more contextual it is, the harder it is going to be for people to understand. But beyond that, I mean, so if you got to the point where the tech works, and how do you figure out if the technology works? Well, you might maybe send it like a sample to somebody in a different country, find them. I don't know if you know somebody there, or maybe you could find somebody on Fiverr who works there and be like, hey, would you just be a product reviewer so I can just see if this thing works? Or you could just literally just start running some ads and check to see what email the people once they get the product and see, hey, did it work? So all those things, the biggest, honestly, the biggest thing is just making sure that you can get shipped there. Because if you can't ship there, that's a deal breaker.
Right.
Obviously. But yeah, assuming that you can ship there, then does the technology work? And then does it contextually work? And that's pretty much it.
Okay. And, from the businesses that you've seen, just kind of your experience dealing with this, I guess internally or just other businesses that you're familiar with, what do you see as a common mistake that companies make when they're attempting to make their products available to an international audience? Well,
the biggest mistake is not translating your site the right way, because it's difficult. You have to end up sending out to natural language translators. Though sometimes they will, they don't send it to the right people, or they just get really bad translations back. Or if they want to go with a reputable company like TransPerfect is a good company, but it's like really, really, really expensive. So you're oftentimes left with this option of like cheaper methods that aren't that good, or like the super gold-plated method that is honestly not right for most small and medium-sized businesses. And so that's why I created a service called translatemystore.com.
Okay.
And it really helps you translate your Shopify store. We're specifically kind of set up for Shopify stores. So I apologize to anybody in the audience who's not a Shopify store, but we're really specifically set up around translating and getting Shopify stores in language, and then translating Facebook ads so that they can run the ads, like the video ads and all the copy in language. And then also translating your email, abandoned cart emails. We kind of focus on Klaviyo emails.
Okay.
That's our system of choice, just because that's kind of like taking over the Shopify system for emails. But really making sure that the customer gets, the ads that they're getting are in language, the website they're landing on in language, the abandoned cart emails they're getting are in language, and then the welcome series is also in language. Okay. And if you don't, lots of times people will do half of it, like they'll get the website translated, but then they don't have the abandoned cart and they don't have other stuff translated.
Right.
And so then it becomes a pain, because you're basically just leaving money on the table. So that's really it. It's like, it can work, right? It's just like, you could be making more money. Yeah. So why wouldn't you want to make more money, right? So that's really, and if you go to my site, www.translatemystore.com, we'll give you kind of a free consultation. We're kind of in the beta mode right now. We have a few customers that we're translating their sites for them, but we're still in beta because we don't want to get like overwhelmed, because, we do have actual translators who are working there. So if we got like 1,000, leads right now, I'd have to scale up my translations, which is totally possible. We just kind of want to get a better idea of demand before we totally scale up. So we plan on a full launch in the fall. But right now we're just taking on the customers that are right for us, and everybody else is kind of getting the backlog. Okay. So, but you should sign up, and I'll give you kind of a full, a free consultation on just like where to start and how to get things going.
Gotcha. Yeah, that sounds like an awesome service, and I think you're right as far as a common mistake is the translation, and that is a big thing. Of course, if people can't read the copy, I mean, they can't do anything really. They're not going to proceed any further with that. So,
yeah, and you'll find, if I could interrupt you 1 second, you find Shopify just did a study, and they said, here are the stats. It's directly from the Shopify study. I think it actually worked with Statica or something like that, which is some stats thing. But anyways, 75% of people want to buy products from brands talking their native language. 59% of people say that they rarely or never buy from English-only e-commerce brands.
Oh, wow.
And 67% prefer navigation and content in their language.
Okay.
So you can see that, like, I can tell you that when we ran ads in Germany in English, they never worked. But when I ran ads in Germany in German, they worked like bonkers, right? Okay. So some countries, like Italy, for example, I was able to run English-speaking ads to Italy, and it actually worked decently well. We were leaving a ton of money on the table because we weren't in Italian. Yeah. But it actually worked okay. So, but German, for example, did not work at all. So there's some people who literally will not buy from you unless it's, and it's hard for us to imagine because we're America and everybody kind of comes, it sounds like kind of conceited, but everybody knows that we kind of were the first people on the internet, right? So people were used to seeing, American dollars, and greenbacks are kind of like internationally known.
Right.
But you could imagine if you were in America and you landed on a site and the pound was in pounds, just like you said, then it seems all weird, right?
Yeah.
And so people in other countries feel the same way. Now they are, and with the one caveat being that they're probably more used to the U.S. dollar than any other currency outside their own. But they're still thinking, is this site actually for me, or is this for Americans?
Yeah, that's what it is. It's there's a level of comfort there, I think, for them, even though, like you said, everybody knows U.S. dollars, and it's not like they're gonna think, oh, this is not in my native currency. Is this really a legitimate site? They're not thinking that, but it's just, like you said, it's a comfort level, and they're them thinking that it may not necessarily be for them. And so it can make a big difference. And like I said before, I had that experience for the first time. And it was definitely funny because, I'm so used to just seeing the U.S. currency. And then, I was buying a legitimate product, but it didn't have the U.S. currency. And I felt funny. And I almost actually jumped ship. I think I got all the way through to the checkout. I hesitated. And then at the last part of the checkout, I said, let me just double check. Is there another product that's, just a U.S. company that has U.S. dollars? And I looked around a little bit, but then I went back to, it was highly recommended by somebody. So I said, okay, let me just go ahead and continue with it. So I definitely understand the pain point that can put people in. Well, Andy, you've provided a whole wealth of information with regards to scaling ads, specifically internationally, as I know it's going to help out a lot of the businesses that are hearing, because this definitely makes a whole lot of sense, specifically because of those stats that you mentioned and leaving so much money on the table. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, how do they do it?
Probably the easiest way is Andy@translatemystore.com.
Okay.
Or just fill out the form on translatemystore.com.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, thanks again, Andy, for joining us today on the e-commerce marketing podcast. We appreciate all of the tips that you've provided.
Cool. Thanks so much, Arlen. I almost called you Adam.
No problem. Thank you for listening to the e-commerce marketing podcast. To access e-commerce videos and other resources to help your business grow, please visit getosi.com/videos. Subscribe to us on iTunes by searching for e-commerce marketing podcast, and please leave a rating and a review. Thanks for listening. See you next time.